So let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So hi everyone. It's very exciting to be here in MG Birmingham, right? Did I pronounce
Bir-
that well? Okay.
Birmingham, yeah.
Okay. All right. So today we are going to be discussing on how vulnerable is your app and how to fix it. Okay. Round. Okay. All right. So for a front-end meetup, somebody might be saying, why security? Like, why are we even looking at security? And I would say, let's look at the data and let the data tell us if we should be discussing this or not. Yeah. All right. So fact time. Now, business email compromise scam cost $26 billion within 2016 to 2019, with the first year being $2.7 billion. So out of the amount mentioned above, we have from 2017, 2018, 2019, the rest of the 23 plus billion, was the cost of business email compromise scam, right? Now, from this figure that we just saw, so we had from 2018 to 2019, the percentage grew by 4.67%. I know it sounds fair enough because you say, okay, sure, a lot of security experts have been, doing stuff to make these things better. Now, but from 2019 to 2020, it grew by 34.86%. Wow, that's a whole lot. That's a whole lot. And to understand this better or to gain more insight, you can look at the sources I've made reference to here. That's also where this data was gotten from. And now somebody out there may be, okay, this doesn't directly affect me, but let's look at the second fact, right? So 10 million DDoS attacks were observed in 2020. Now that's the most ever we've had in a single year. Now, when you break it down, 10 million DDoS attacks in a year, what we come up with is having 19 attacks per minute in 2020. So it's no longer a question of would I be attacked? I'm too small to be attacked. It's now more of when would I be attacked? When would I have a DDoS attack? Yeah. So, and would I be ready for it? Just okay. So, more facts. So, attacks on web applications rose by 800% in the first 6 months of 2020 compared to the same period last year. And this is according to reports from CDN and cloud security provider CDN Networks. I think with all this data we have just seen, the data is telling us to speak on, to go ahead with, discussing this. But before we do, I would like to introduce myself. So I'm Oti Kelechi. I'm a senior front-end engineer. I also do a lot of software consultancy. I'm co-organizer Angular Nigeria. So you can find me on Twitter at OT_Kelechi. And anywhere you see the picture or the avatar should be mostly maybe on GitHub or some other places, then there's a high chance it's me. So let's get back to our talk. Now, security is very big, very, very big. And so I have to bring out just 3 parts to focus on, or say 3 sections to focus on. So we're looking at the first level security, right? These are everyday things we can do to secure our apps. Then HTTPS protocol, we've all been hearing of HTTPS protocol, probably even all have apps running on HTTPS. But we'll look at how to implement this, why we should implement it, and how best to implement this. Yeah. Then we're looking at the CSP header. So we'll just touch down on how CSP can help us, to improve our security. Then we'll be finding out for real, how vulnerable are you? Yeah. So before we go on, I would like us to imagine, an application without any of the things we're going to discuss today, right? We're imagining the security of the application, right? And let's compare it to a door. So that app would look like this. Yeah, like a Cheetos just holding it. Somebody might think it's locked, but it's actually not locked. So how are we going to improve the security of our Cheetos security looking app? Yeah. So first level security, these are basic things that we should do. So don't send passwords in GET request, because when people send password in GET request, most times they're sending it as a query parameter, and that doesn't make any sense. So use a post request. Yeah, use a post request when you're sending the password. Um, yeah, don't send or save passwords plain. This is quite arguable, in our world right now due to some certain reasons. But I would say it's best not plain, because somebody might just have access to the server logs and now can see everybody's passwords in plain text. Doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and we have the basic authentication. They're just very simple things we can use to just add an extra layer of security, right? Ensure your APIs are secure. So now after you've logged in, now the first 2 points you made is more of, okay, when you're trying to log in or when you're trying to sign up, to log in, most likely log into your application. So after you've logged in, how do you secure every API request? Um, Make sure you're using an authentication strategy. It might be the auth1 or auth2 strategy you're using. I would subscribe more to the auth2. If you don't want to do it yourself, there are third parties like auth0 and some other guys that give you this. And yeah, it's not so stressful. And I'm saying this point because I know years back there was an application that I happened to come across, and emails were what was being sent back to the to the server for every API call, right? And that certainly isn't secure. It means if an attacker stumbles upon that web application, he doesn't even need to authenticate. All he needs to know is the email of somebody who has access. And getting anyone's email is certainly not hard. It's as easy as getting your name. And voila, that would be how an application was broken. Ensure your APIs have a circuit breaker. Okay, so in our electric appliances, most of the heads we put to the wall, can't remember the electrical name, they have a circuit breaker in it. So what the circuit breaker does is when current that's far higher than what that device is meant to take comes in, it cuts off the electricity. And most times you just have to change the circuit breaker, and the circuit breaker is usually very cheap, compared to maybe the $300 or the $500 device, right? That would have spoiled. So what this does when we bring it down to software development is, okay, so I have an API and we have run this stuff for a while, and we've seen that, okay, people should be making API calls. If you're using this app normally, you should be making maybe 60 API calls per minute. So anybody making 1,000 API calls per minute, you're probably doing something fishy and would just like to just hold it there. So that's what this does. So if somebody is trying to do a DDoS attack on your site, on your front end, this would stop it without even going the exact same way it happens in electrical appliances, without it even going to the back end at all. Yeah. So validate and sanitize your user input. Now, validating your user input is more for user experience to make your site more usable and more friendly. But sanitizing your user input is prime. But thankfully, if you're using a framework like Angular does this for you. So if a code or something was injected through an input, Angular has sanitized that, so it it won't run. You just see it as a text, but that malicious script put in maybe an input box will not run or do have any effect it's meant to have on the page. Yeah, then last in this category, don't set access origin to wildcard. Now this is very popular. This is very common. So a very normal scenario, you start working on a new project and the backend person gives you an API. And we're like, okay, I'm having a course origin request issue here, enable course. And the person say, okay, I've enabled course, set it to a wildcard. Now, this is not too bad when your app is still in development. But once it gets to production, there is certainly no need for it to still be a wildcard because you do not need everybody to call this app. So it's important that you set the specific host that you expect to call this, which is probably example.com, as the host that should be able to call, that API. And for some of these things here, you might not be the one doing it on your front end, but you are part of the team, and it's important that you communicate this right to the backend person. Okay, so we're going to look at how basic authentication looks like. So the first screen we have here is for basic authentication. So the basic authentication simply says the word basic, your unique identifier, which is either the username or the email, then colon, the password, and it comes as a header. So this is quite simple. So it shouldn't even take more than a minute, 2 minutes to set up. Now, the circuit breaker thing I mentioned earlier. Now, the best way to set up circuit breaker implementation is from the backend, right? So it's not just to leave it to the front end if you want to do a complete circuit breaker implementation. But the way to do it on the front end is to send this limit. So you can see the X here showing that it's still experimental. So it's not yet cast in stone, but yes, we can still use it. And some browsers like Chrome supports this. So we have X rate limit, X rate limit remaining, and X rate limit reset. So X rate limit is saying, okay, this particular API is saying I only need, or I'm expecting, oh, there's a lot of noise. Hopefully it's not disturbing so much. Okay, so saying, okay, a user should only be making a maximum of 40 calls per minute, and this is how many is remaining from the 40 calls, right? That I'm expecting. Now, if this 40 calls is exceeded, it will take 60 seconds to reset it. Now, during that time of when it is being reset to when you are able to make another API call, a 429 error comes saying too many requests have been made to the backend, and that just comes from the front end. So that's cool. So now we have all of this implemented in our application. We'll say that the security of our app would now look somewhat like this. Now, this isn't too bad. This isn't too shabby. This is far better than it was before, right? But the problem with this is if I have a crowbar, I could still get out this lock. Or if I have an axe, I would, break to the wood and have access. So this is fair, but not good enough. So how can we make this better? So we have HTTPS. Now, HTTPS stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocols Secure. Yeah. So this protocol ensures that communication is encrypted. So it ensures an end-to-end encryption of information, right? So even your service providers can't read or inject any, information into the data stream that you're passing, right? So why HTTPS? So the illustration I just gave now is a typical example of a man-in-the-middle attack, right? So supposing you go, or your customer, or whoever is in your app goes to maybe a cafe and is using a public Wi-Fi and doesn't really know the source of that public Wi-Fi. Now, what's happening is this person's passwords and everything this person is passing can be seen, by wherever this internet source is coming from, and that person and somebody who has access to that can actually use that information. The ability is you can use it, or you can either inject something, right? You can inject something and okay, the front end didn't actually send this, but now that information now goes to the back end. Yeah. So that's a man-in-the-middle attack. So this protects against HTTPS protects against this. So after you've set up HTTPS, you would most likely still have your HTTP because some customers, some clients are still going to go to their browsers and type HTTP, and you don't want them to see nothing, right? So you don't also want them to stay in the non-secure site. So it's important that you set up your redirects properly to go to the HTTPS site. Now, after your redirects have been set up, what's the next step? So you have to make sure that HSTS is in place. Now, HSTS is quite simple, and let me explain it. Now, HSTS is actually just the security header, right? Just the security header. So it stands for HTTP Strict Transport Security. So it includes the max age and okay, do you want to include subdomains or not? Really, that's it. So the max age for this that we're looking at is a year. It comes in seconds. So things you should know about HSTS. So it declares that the client should only interact with the site over HTTPS, and it protects against downgrade attacks. So downgrade attacks is you're going to HTTP and trying to do the attack there because it is now when someone goes to the HTTP site, now the time before it redirects to HTTPS, they can actually be a man-in-the-middle attack. You might actually, so if an attacker is in the middle, you can actually tell it to redirect to another location which you didn't even intend for it to redirect to. Yeah, but it has a clause, so it relies on its trust on first use. So the first time it believes that it is coming to a trusted platform, then from then till when the max age has elapsed, it protects you. So let me show you how this works. So now if a website does not have HTTPS, so this is the HTTP of this site, this has HTTPS set up, even has this on the redirect, that redirect has been set. So when you come here, what you will most likely see is a 301 move permanently. Then you will also see the location, right, where it is meant to go to. Now, this is where the attacker can inject where he wants, this site to go to, right? Because it was in HTTP, right? Even if you have the HTTPS done properly, right? So what would the HSTS do here for us? So when the person also comes here, you would see this, but you see a different thing. You see that the strict transport security header, that's HSTS, has been set here. And when the user comes here a second time, they would see that it is a 307 internal redirect, so it does not even load. And this is what you see, non-authoritative using HSTS. Yeah. So that's how we can set up, that's what HSTS will do for us. And I'll be showing us later how we can set it up depending on how we are hosting our front end. Okay, so with this done, so we have seen the first level security, we've done our HTTPS rightly. I believe the security is somewhat like this. Now, this is not bad at all. This is not bad at all, but we can do better. We can do better. And that brings us to the CSP. Now, CSP is short for Content Security Policy. So it's an added layer of security that helps to detect and mitigate certain types of attacks, including cross-site scripting, data injection attacks. So it's majorly focusing on anything that has to do with cross-site scripting, injections, and the likes. So these attacks are used for everything from data theft to site defacement and distribution of malware. So CSP is actually really cool, and I think everyone should have this on their website. Yeah. So we'll be looking at some attributes of CSP. Now, there are actually so many. We're looking at just a few. I would encourage everyone to go check Mozilla Docs. Google also has some documentations here, and it's really simple to implement. So if I have my site and all the JavaScript I'm loading, I know that okay, they are from my app, right? And maybe I don't have any external sources. I can actually state self against the script source attribute. So this I would stop injected script here. That's for this line. And if you don't want any script to be injected, more like the script type of scripts, you go to the console, you open a site, you go to the console and just run a script. Yeah, this will stop that. Unsafe inline, would stop that. For the one I mentioned earlier, you have all your scripts on the app. You're not calling any third-party scripts. You can just have self here, and any other scripts trying to run will not run. Okay. So we want to stop access to unknown resources. So you can set the image source or the media source attributes here. So for many people, you have an image processor, especially if your site deals heavily with images. So you have an image microservice, and there's a unique URL for maybe unique beginning, right? There's a unique pattern for how your images should flow. Now, this is where you should put that. This is where you should put that. So to block every other image that doesn't follow that pattern. So now API calls. Now you are making API calls for many of us to be maybe API or stage.api or staging.api example.com or company.com. Now that should be what is here. So if you have other third-party APIs, you can add multiple. So these headers actually support multiple. So and this iFrame ancestor. So now for some applications like banking apps and the rest of them, if your application isn't meant to be used by another app, or as maybe you are not a payment processor like Stripe, or for us Paystack, right? So there's no need for your app to be showing up in an iframe, then it shouldn't show up in an iframe. Yeah. So if you have this header set up to deny, when somebody tries to put your app in an iframe, it's just not going to load, right? So this would protect against clickjacking or keyboard logging, which happens when somebody puts an iframe, inserts your URL there, makes the height 100 VH the width, 100 VW, and it looks as if it's your site. And they put maybe a div on top just to be able to get the keystrokes or the person trying to enter their password or whatever. But if you have done, this one liner, you would have saved whoever was going to fall for that trick. Now, what I really, really do love about CSP is that you can set CSP from your HTML. Yeah, you can set it from your HTML. How do you set it? So in the head tag, all you need to do is put this meta http equiv state this content, then everything you want to put comes into this place. So for this, I have set the connect source, right? So like I mentioned earlier, the connect source is for the API. So I'll say, okay, all my APIs are going to be from this guy. So I put them here, API example.net. Now my font, I'm only going to be loading fonts from this URL. So I put it here, frame ancestor, none. I don't want the site to show if anybody puts it in an iframe. And that's what it's going to be. Now, with just these lines of code, you have secured, added an extra layer of security to your application. But of course, not all the CSP headers. Like I don't think this frame ancestor one, it recognizes on the HTML. So it's best to set it up from the server side. And one last thing, and one very beautiful thing about CSP. Now, for anyone that has dabbled or played with CSP before, now when you set, the default we see in examples, you see default source self. Now, when you put default dash source self, it means my images are for me, my API calls are for me, everything has to be for my own domain. And what that happens is when your site is using a third-party script or so many other things, your app will not even load. I've seen many people being very confused about that. Now, if you're not very sure of the header you need, and you don't want to just break your application on production, or you're scared of breaking your staging, you can use this, content security policy reports only. Now, this does not also work on the HTML, so this has to be set on the server config. Now, what this does is it's not going to stop it from loading, but it's going to log it in the console, right? That, this guy shouldn't have loaded. And you can also put a report API that it can send all this to, right? Because of course you're a developer, you're not looking at everybody's console, yeah? So I know the next question is, okay, all this sounds cool, but I'm still in the dark of the how, in the dark of how I should go about this. Okay, we'll come back to this, right? So you can set it up in, if you have your site, if your site is hosted with Amazon and Amazon S3, that means probably it's static and there's no need for SSL on it. And this is not for Angular Universal. You can set it up on Amazon Lambda Edge. So Amazon Lambda Edge allows you to put some scripts there that can run. Now you can actually go to, if you require conversations with the Amazon S3, it has some header compartments. You can actually enter that for each of the headers, but I feel everyone using Amazon S3 should use CloudFront, since it just makes distribution, so much better. And if you're using CloudFront, the way to do this is the Lambda Edge. So you can also use this same format, since it's also a security header like HSTS, to set up your HSTS header. Right, so with all these beautiful things done in our application, and I think our app will then look like this. Yeah, and you'll be one proud developer. Yes, and not just you, your customers will feel safe using your app, and you generally feel safer knowing that DDoS attacks are not going to break you, and your app is going to be far, far more stable, right? So yes, I've shown how it's going to be done, or I've mentioned it can be done on S3. Someone is like, okay, wow, that's nice. But it's still, okay, show me the code. So here is the code, right? So if you are using, this is for Amazon Lambda Edge, you can see it's really just the headers. So what this is doing is, for every request going, is attaching this, before sending this request out. So you are intercepting it from the request point before it actually sends out the response. Yeah. So the max age that we saw includes subdomains, connect source, everything. You can set it from here. So if you fully set up CSP, you might not even need this guy here, but I would also advise us to go look at CSP. CSP has so many things that are fun and can really help can really help us. So I know the next question is, okay, now I have the code. Now, how do I get the right variables or the right URLs to put in? That's meant to be the tiny itty bitty work. But again, there's some tool out there always helping us get work done faster. And ooh, okay, so I will show you that later. So it's a tool that Mozilla um, 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 produced. Okay, so let's go straight down to the big question. How vulnerable is your site? So at this point, I would have said, okay, if you're so sure that your app is 100% not vulnerable, drop a URL, in the chat. But okay, I think I'll just wait a bit. Maybe anyone is bold enough. Let's not take anyone's shine. Okay, let me make sure I'm looking at the chat. Alex, please, if anyone drops any, please let me know. Okay.
Come on, what's your work? Somebody put put your work link in there, and let's see how secure your website is.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not seeing any, but all right, let's
No, not
proceed.
yet.
It's understandable. I wouldn't anyway if I was on your side right now. Okay, so now there's a URL that helps us to solve this problem, right? Now, after watching most of these things, you're like, I'm not so bad, but this guy will really give you the metrics. And it's not just to give you the metrics. I think it can also help you when you have to talk to maybe your engineering manager or to talk to, irrespective of the structure of your company, anyone that you show, this and the grades don't look so good. Yeah, we would say, oh, let's fix this, right? But it doesn't take so much time as well. But this can help someone. So let's go there. So I would stop sharing this screen so we can go to where we need that. Okay, just a second. All right, can you see my screen now? Okay.
Yes, yep.
All right. So, of course, I have to try with the site, but don't worry. I've double checked to make sure that I'm not dragging anybody's name in the mud here. Right. So Alex reached out to me from Twitter. All these conversations were handled on Twitter. Now imagine if maybe I got a message that, oh, there's been a change in the time. I'm like, oh, okay. And I didn't know it was from maybe a man in the middle, attack. So there was no better person to check than Twitter. So when you're doing this, please don't be in a hurry. You can specify that don't include my sites in public results, right? Anything that makes it easier for you because you're here to learn and to make your site more secure, right? And Twitter scores an A plus. Yay! And if you don't get an A plus, they would give you a whole lot of suggestions and recommendations. Even Twitter has some recommendations with an A plus, right? So now they set up CSP, the cookies are secured, set up HSTS, the redirection is here, referral policy. So you can see there's some things that don't really matter. Xframe options, but this Xframe options has already been covered. If you're using the right, you can use the right CSP header and that covers it. And yeah, they still give you some other things. There are some other things you can check. But yeah, I feel this is good. Now, this is a step in the right direction, but this should not be a metric to say, okay, I have done the security part 100%. No. So this is really just checking. So let's read the first one for Twitter, content security policy. It says the CSP was implemented with unsafe sources inside the source. That's the source for the style, right? So this includes this and data. So this means that the spectrum was too broad. It almost allowed everything. So just setting this, because you can actually set these headers and still after setting these headers, you allow everything. Now that's, you're not benefiting yourself. You might get an A here, but your app really isn't secure. So please, this is just a step in the right direction. Ensure you also update. When you update your third-party libraries, you actually, if you set your script source, you actually have to go update that. I know. So this looks nice. And Mozilla has actually helped, and it's a very lovely tool, I must say. It's called Laboratory. Last time I checked, that was about December last year. I don't think Chrome has something like this. Maybe there is one now, but this is awesome. So what this does is, once you install this extension on your browser, you go to a site, it can help suggest, right? So it's literally taking out all the third parties, all the sources you're calling, and you can see it. So if you come here, this is the extension on my Chrome. So you can record this site. So when you record this site, what it will do is it will mention everything. Oh, this is the third parties is calling. So this is if it typically just generates the CSP header for you, right? All right, so if you do this on your site, you would see everything here, and you can copy it and paste it, send it to your, I already showed the script earlier, the Lambda script. So it's going to be my slide that I'll share on Twitter or wherever. So you can, just look at that. And yeah, so this is an example of how it looks. So it just helps you to generate this. So you're not really even doing so much work. At the end of the day. So I will 100% recommend you check that plugin out. It would save you a whole lot of time. Okay, so that's it here. So thank you for listening, and have any questions, have anything you want to talk about, I'm on Twitter at @Oti_Kelechi. Yeah, so yeah. So thanks, Alex. I think that's it for
Thanks,
me.
Oti. Any questions? Now we'll give you a round of applause, like virtually, but any questions, anyone?
Yeah, I would like to ask you about your methods. Like, it depends on server and client side, or just like for about circle breakers or HTTPS. If you want to ensure your Angular app, for example, to be working only via HTTPS, you should do it on client side and server side both.
Okay, so it's the HTTPS configuration is done where your site is hosted. So it's on the, what we call it now is the DevOps, right? But from my experience working with several teams, most times the DevOps, they don't care. So until you stamp your feet on the ground and say, do I have HSTS on my site? And they say you do, check the header coming back. You can go to the console, you check the header coming back for each of the requests. If it doesn't have it, you ensure that it is there. So this is security as it affects the front end. So for the circuit breaker, I showed us the Chrome implements this, but it's still experimental, which means that Internet Explorer does not implement this, and some other Asian browser. Yes, Mozilla will implement this. So it can be done on the two sides. On the front end, using the X rate limit, dash limits, and the remaining and all that, and also on the back end. So if you're using Node, there's actually a library that just implements circuit breaker. It does mention how many requests per minute you want, what do you want to set the request as, and all that. Okay. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I believe it is. And about Angular and cross-site scripting attack, I heard that Angular implements it built-in feature. Is it true, or
Yes.
just partial?
Yes. So like I mentioned earlier, for inputs, it tries to sanitize inputs. If you have tried to to put data in an iframe in Angular, you see you have to do a DOM sanitizer before that data can go to, because by default Angular does not allow it. So you have to indicate that, hey, this is me, the application developer, saying that you should permit this. So yes, Angular has some of these things already set down, but Angular seems to be quite secure. I don't think I've not seen any or read any security vulnerability on Angular on these things, but there was a particular framework that a couple of months back had, an issue, related to security. So I would just say, choose your frameworks wisely and also double check if you can.
So if Angular is secure, that means that I'll talk about like full stack, like server and client together, communicating between.
Yeah, so that's majorly what it was. So Angular is secure when it comes to sanitizing your data, but there are some other things that you will just have to bring up to have this implemented. Unless your company is going to lose money. If you're fine with your company losing money because it wasn't directly at your desk, then maybe it's okay. But yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Oti.
All right, thanks, Taras. Hope I got the name.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, other, especially with jQuery, I think some older versions had some security problems. So if you're using jQuery, even if you're using Angular or React or Vue, if you use jQuery, make sure you're on the latest versions of it, because sometimes jQuery has a bit of some issues on the older versions. And with Angular, it's got a lot of built-in security, especially with injecting JavaScript. And sometimes we have to, especially if you get some data, let's say you get some content for your CMS, let's say like a headless CMS, and you have some styling that is part of the the text, and then we have to use that safe HTML. Usually there's a pipe that we create, and then you use that in inner HTML on your div or wherever you put your your text, and you use that safe pipe basically and say, this is a safe HTML because I know it, because it comes from my server and does not inputted by somebody else. It comes from my own.
That's the way Angular handles it for URL. So at least you are aware that, I am the one allowing this particular one. Yeah, thumbs up to Angular on that. That's really helped.
Any other questions?
I had one. Are you able to explain a bit more about how Hsts works?
Okay.
I guess I had a question. My understanding is that if there's someone who fakes the response and tries to get the browser to redirect, it protects against that attack?
Yes, exactly. So when you go to a HTTP site, normally go to the HTTP site. So what's happening is it has loaded the HTTP, right? So when it loaded the HTTP, there is a part that says, oh, this guy has been permanently moved. So the redirection happens on the browser level, right? And says, okay, redirects to this guy. Now, but when there is a HSTS header there, once it sees that the max age and every other thing, the strict transport security has been set, the browser does not need to wait for it to just all load. It automatically redirects to HSTS. Now, to the HTTPS site, the only issue, right, which HSTS is the first time you are loading it. That's why I mentioned the trust on first use. The first time you are loading it, it is not so secure, right? Because that's the time it registers the header on the browser. But for every other time you make that request to HTTP, that is covered. HSTS covers you there.
Okay, so is the attack that you go to an HTTP site and you get redirected to HTTPS, but someone tries to send you somewhere else? Is that correct?
Yes, that can happen. So that's the man in the middle attack. It can. So okay, a good way would be, all right, so there was a time I was discussing with some developers at a place I worked, and a gentleman, I'll call him a gentleman in this case, said, okay, in school, students do. So he set up something, and it looked like an open Wi-Fi, and it had a page. The school, you go and log in for you to access Wi-Fi, and maybe you have 10 MB or 20 MB allocated to you, whatever it was then. And it was just a page. And what he was doing was collecting, that data, right? So if it was over HTTP, he wouldn't be able to do that, right? So it's also something that everyone should be more cautious of. You shouldn't put any data over HTTP because it's not secure, right? So as we were typing in, he was just seeing it. He didn't even need to do any extra thing. As long as that request was just passing through, he was seeing it. Yeah, so that's the so the man in the middle can be that, okay, you can see it, and the second part is you can actually send another data than what maybe the front end was trying to communicate to the server. So those are two sides of it. You can see what you shouldn't see, and you can send what didn't come from the front end. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, well, I guess now these days with the Chrome, that highlights straight away the HTTP. If it's not HTTPS, it's good, but we still shouldn't rely on it because there might be people on older versions or older browsers or even IE11, and yeah, then they're not protected. So
yeah, and most times when we build, we think of only us techies. If you meet probably somebody in our generation within the span of 10 years that does not understand the difference between HTTPS and HTTP, he might just go to the browser and type HTTP, and he doesn't really care about not secure. At the end of the day, that's your customer or your client that is doing something foolish that will rub off on you at the end of the day. So yeah.
Yeah, and then they bookmark it, and then they can go forever to the
HTTP
one.
You got it. They bookmarked it, and that was the only one they're going to be using. Just so sad.
And then share it with their friends and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah.